Okay, mitzvah kuf saliches. This is a mitzvah which most of the Rishonim are up in arms on the Rambam, against the Rambam. A mitzvah hashmona v'tishim u'meya hi shitzivonu levakesh chibis min hagoy. In that's Eben Tibin in Kapach. It's lahatil chibis al hagoy, which makes more sense. The question is, are you asking for it, or there is a ktsitza for it? And l'chayra, we'll see later that you should assume there's a ktsitza. The oz nal ve'oisai. Doesn't seem to be that the mitzvah is to be malva beribis, but if you want to give him a loan, the loan should be only under the following circumstances, that it should be a ktsitz of ribis. He should levakesh lahat ribis al hagoy, the oz now v'oisai. So what happens is there's a mitzvah on a goy if we want to give a loan. And if we're giving a loan to a Jew, we should give it without ribbis. There's no mitzvah to give a loan without ribbis. Mitzvah is to give the loan. And by a goy, if we want to give a loan, the mitzvah is to give a loan with ribbis. And there should be a ktsitza in the etzem halvo. It's not. In other words, if you give a loan and afterwards charge ribbis, you didn't do anything. The mitzvah is that, as it says, shetzivonu levakesh ribbis min hagoy lahat ribbis al hagoy v'oz nal v'oisai. The ktsitza and the kfiyas ribbis should be before the halvo. So, in a certain sense, it's not a chiyuv to lend a goy beribis. It's a chiyuv if you're lending a goy to do it beribis. So it's like the mitzvahs in Hilchos Brachos, Perek Aleph Halacha Beis, where the Ram says they're mitzvahs which are rishus. Doimel rishus. There's no mitzvah to have a house and to live in a house, but if you live in a house, you have to have a mezuzah or a micah or whatever. Now, so we know a goy, and goy is in the ksavya, it's goy, and we know a Jew, that the mitzvah is on a goy, and a Jew, there's no mitzvah, and you're not allowed to do beribis, it says lavim. What about a ger toshev? So the Torah says, "Lanochi sashich, ulochicha lo sashich." So lanochi is some foreign. We'd have to know what the word means. Ulochicha is certainly not ochicha. But the question is inochri. And we'll see the ger toshev is not b'chal nochri, and he's also not b'chal ochicha. So the chayy to the portion is no mitzvah malba beribis. And since he's not called a nochi, and we'll see rayis about that. And so the chayra, and there's no isa to be malba to a ger toshev beribis. So the chayy shall be a heta. So I see a Moshe, dibus Moshe. Chelik Beis, Ein Beis, or Ein Beis, says that by ger toshev it's only a heta, and that if we look at the Rambam in Perek Halacha Aleph, hagoy ve'ger toshev lovin mehen umal v'noisan beribus, shenem lo sashich lo chicha. Lochicha also ulishar ha'olam muta. So now it's muta. Umitzvah say lahashich legoy. So l'chayra, he's saying very clearly that a Jew is a goy. There's a mitzvah, and a ger toshav, there's a heta. And it's mistaba like that, because the word nochri in posuk is referring to a goy, not a ger toshav, because we have the posuk leiseichel kol nevela lager asher b'shochecho titneno v'acholo or mochel nochri. So there's lager asher b'shochecho is the ger toshav, and the mechira is lenochri. And the Sefer says the ger sheb'shohecha melamed shenoisem matana leger toshav. And also in the Mishnah Ola in Perek Gimel Loch Aleph, Mei mashma shenemar leiseichel kol nevela leize dovo nemar lager sheb'shohecha tidneno v'acholo bolo dicha sheger toshav oichel nevelos. So leger is a ger toshav. And therefore the Rambam writes, when he's referring to the mitzvah, in many times he refers to the mitzvah Lenochri. In Minakotze lahavos Lenochri, Beribis. Pir Shmuel Omnus mitzvah Aseh, the Protea mitzvahs Ligois Hanochri. In Ligois. But it's Nochri. Now, then it continues, the Rambam. The Lashon of Ibn Tim is a little bit odd over here. V'oz nal v'loi ad shelo no ilehu v'loi na'azeloi. So ad doesn't make much sense. Kapach's translation of, he says, Kidei shaloi na'azaloi v'loi nachneu. So that makes sense. In other words, the reason why we're giving ribis, the reason why it's a halvo with ribis is to be mazik the goy. First of all, you shouldn't be oize the goy and help him anyway today, and otherwise we should be mazik. So by a goy, where there's an isa matnes chinam and there's no mitzvah achiyasa, we understand that there could be an idea of kedei shalom ni'avlo nazoloi avol nazikosa. But a ger toshav, who the mitzvahs l'chayosei, and there's a hete of matana, so l'chayra, there's no problem. But he's not in the mitzvah. So the kedei explains why the mitzvah is by goy, but on the other hand, it also explains why there's no mitzvah by ger toshav. So this is an amazing thing, okay? And I can't say I understand it 100%. The question is, where are we coming from? Because Tam Goy is over Avodah Zarah. So we find in the Torah that there's a Goy b'mechira, okay? But even though Goy is mechira, the lav of Lifnei Iver is also by a Goy. And Gezel Akum, we have to know this, and we know with Gezel Akum. But that it's clear in the Torah The Rambam says, or the state in the Torah, that when the Torah said there's a mitzvah ribis, there's nazikeu. So does it mean he's saying there's a mitzvah to be mazik a goy? We don't find such a thing. See, one thing is to say there's no mitzvah to give you matnas chinam. But on the other hand, the Ram says that wouldn't explain why there's a mitzvah of halvot to a goy. And maybe together, well, lנכרי tigos. So it's strange, no mitzvah l'chiyosei. There's an Isa of Gzela, there's Lifnei Iva, Leisite Michsho. But he's trying, we understand from this mitzvah that Ki'ilu, there's an Inyan Lahazik to the goy. Is it only over here? Do we find it in general? Do we find it in an expression? The Ram L'cheira, he doesn't quote in Mishnah Torah. There's a mitzvah L'cheira. It's only over here. It's a very strange thing. So it means not that it's a mitzvah that L'cheira, that we shouldn't give him a teiba. I don't get it. I just don't get it. But see, the important thing, until this point, I would have said it's an isolated phenomenon. And it's only halvah. But the next line where he says, Va'afilu bi'inyan halvah shenehene imoy. Or the way it's in Kappa, afilu alidei halvah beribis shenotno olov. So the adizikeu, it seems to be in general. Afilu b'halvah shenotno olov. So it means that the mazik is not isolated. Even though you like to say it's over here, I'm not sure you'll be able to read the words. This is a very difficult Rambam. I didn't see people talking about it, but it raises a lot of questions in the, at least in the Rambam's frame of reference, of how he looks at our relationship with a Gentile. And then I ask even more, because if you look at halvah beribis as Poshta Mazik and to Likonisito L'chayiv, as they say, so we have no clue whatsoever why there should be a heter beger toshav. Because we don't find that there's a heter to be mazik a ger toshav. You want lachiyosei, and there's a heter matnas chinam, and so it becomes very, very odd, to say the least. So I'm sorry, I just want to point out the problems. Avo nazikose vafilu beinyan halvo shenitnu olav kimo shuzhalnu me'aseis kachim Yisrael. So here it's very clear that the mitzvah is to do to a goy what would have been ashar by Yisrael, and the mitzvah that is only with ksitza. Ribis mucheres ribis dvorim, you're not makayim the mitzvah. The mitzvah is with ksitzah. And that's what's very clear. Lahatil a ribis al goy v'oz nal ve'oisai. Now, next. Vu omroi yis'aleh lanochri sashich. V'hine bo lonu hapirish hamakubel ki zeh. Now I'm using kapach in Ibn Tibin. It says ki zeh HaMitzvah lo rishus, and in kapach ki zeh hatzivui lo rishus. So the independent, there are two reasons why I'm changing the translation to tzivui and not HaMitzvah, okay? First of all, I'll do it the way the Chachmei Ashkenaz, the Sofas, because it's interesting in the Sefer Torah from Sofas, they were very, very schwach and poor in terms of adherence to a singular manuscript. In Sfarad, they were much, much better. And all the Sefer Ashkenaz, the mysterious Sefer Torah can't be Ashkenaz, because in Chachmei Ashkenaz or Chachmei Tzofas, they used to magia misloa. They say, for Torah, you can't do such a thing. We probably did such a thing. And you understand misloa, you'd want something to be the antonym of rishus. So it's tzivui or choiva, but our mitzvah doesn't fit, okay? But that's not a reason at all to make a change. The reason is that the Arabic, the text, is amal in all the kisviyad that we have, both in Oxford with Bloch and in Kapach. In amal, we understand the translation is sivui. So the word is sivui, and sivui is the opposite of rishus, so it makes a lot of sense. And the question is this, see, ki zeh hamitzvah lo rishus doesn't make any sense. He's trying to prove, and besides, independent of the argument that it should be the opposite, and independent of the translation, the sentence has to make sense. Now, let's read a sentence. V'hine bo lonu apirish makubo ki zeh hamitzvah v'lo rishus doesn't make any sense. You want to say that it's a tzivui, and it's an obligation, it's not rishus. So for all these three reasons, and especially since the original Arabic is amal, at least in the text that we have, unless Ibn Tibin had a different text. But even if he did, the text that we have don't bear it out, and we don't even know how to read it. Okay, so what happened over here? It says lanochri shashich v'hine bo lonu apirish hamakubo ki zeh tzivui v'lo rishus. It means that if you've been left to pshuto shel mikra and you'd want to translate the words lanochri sashich, you would have said that it's a heter. So comes the Pirush Makubal and says that it's amal, it's a tzivui. And even though Pshuta Shomikra is mashma, it's a rishus, if the Pirush Makubal says there's a tzivui, then it's a mitzvah minyan. And how do we know that the Pirush Makubal said this? Because of the Sifri. And Stam Sifri, as we know, according to the Rambam, is a Pirush Makubal. Kach Kibalnu Mimoshe Rabbeinu. For Omram B'Sifri, Lanochi Sashich Mitzvahs Aseh Ulochicha Loi Sashich Mitzvahs Loi Aseh. So the Pirush, it's very strange. I would have written this that the Pirush Makubal is saying that there's a mitzvah and that's it. So he's saying and that's maybe what the Ibn Tibbon thought. But then the word lo rishus doesn't make any sense. Kizeh ha-mitzvah doesn't make any sense either, translation. But it says zo mitzvah aseh. But he says you can't imagine a mitzvah aseh unless there's a sivui. So it must be that the Pirush Makubal says sivui, and the Matiki Shmua said, "Oh, how does say? There's a Pirush, there's a mitzvah say." Okay, very nice. Next, that's very nice. But why should the Rambam continue and quote the second half of the Sifri? Ulochicha loisashich zo mitzvahs loisaseh. So I could imagine that the Rambam thought that someone could come and say, mitzvah say might mean nisa say. But since it's put and with a contrast with ochicha, so it means here there's a mitzvah say of kumva say to do something, and there's a loisa say by ochicha. So maybe he's using this as a wedge to prove that the pshat in the Sifri is a kumbasei and a mitzvasei. We'll come back. Just let's finish the words at least. Ula mitzvah zo gam kein tnoyim derabonon. Ula mitzvah zo gam kein tnoyim derabonon. Should come back. The question is, why is that important for us to tell us? And what is the Rambam Meramis to? But I think we'll understand that more so after we get into the Sugi Bab Mitzia, Lineda, and the Rishonim's issues of the Rambam. But this is part of addressing the issues. Ukva his boye Pirush zo Meseches Bab Mitzia. 1 second. So this. 1 second. Oh, everything. Kvar nisboru v'yesh l'mitzvah zot tnoim midrabonon kvar nisboru b'meseches mitzia. So this is much better. This line over here, Pirush zeh, doesn't make any sense. Kvar nisboru b'meseches mitzia. He's explaining that the tnoim will explain about mitzia. This Pirush Zu doesn't make any sense. What Pirush is he talking about? Because the Pirush Makubal, unless he means that the Pirush Makubal, that there's a mitzvah say, is explained about mitzvah. No. Or the din of the Pirush Zu, we have to see and look into this and see if there's any sources to say. Okay, now, next. That's what we have. On topic again, ukvan nisbaru dine mitzvah zo excuse me, one thing. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry. Hey, I got the wrong page. This, he says, V'yesh l'mitzvot tnoim d'rabbanon, kvar nisba'aru, which go on the tnoim d'rabbanon, Maseches Metzias. So that makes sense. Okay. Now, here, it's mamish kimat rishonim, one after the next are coming after the Rambam. You'll see in my Sanisim, the tshuva, there's a she'ela from Dinir Abavli, Travam ben Rambam, the Ramban in Hasogis, the Shiur Shishi is very clear at the end of Shiur Shishi, where he's discussing this about Isui Aseh. He said it's very clear to him that Ribis Turgoy is an Isaseh. The Minyan HaKotzer, the Raiv in the Minyan HaKotzer, and also in Mishnah Torah, Perek Halocha Aleph, he also holds that the Pshat Sifri is an Isaseh, and they claim in a singular voice that that's Pshat Nigmova Mitzvah. See, you understand yourself even before we get to the Gemara Mitzvah, the Rambam's thesis that the Sifri is a Pirush Mekubal, and discussing mitzvahs. You see, if the purpose of the Sifri is when it says, or Sifra, or Mechilta, say mitzvah say, is tell it's a mitzvah ben aminyan, so the option of interpreting the Sifri as an Isaseh, especially if you're not counting Isaseh, according to the Rambam, is very difficult. The Ramban, if you accept the Ramban's approach that the Rambam counts Isaseh, so it could be an Isaseh, and it's a mitzvah. But it's not clear at all in the Rambam. That's true, and we've discussed this many times. Comes the Ran. In Chidush, it's a whole sugi in Bab Metzia. I'm not sure if the point is, if you want, we can go through the sugi back and forth and in and out. But I thought that it might be more productive to read the Ran, and if you like, we can go through the sugi. The Chidush Ran in Bab Metzia. In base, he says like this. He quotes the opinion of the other Rishonim that are cholik on the Rambam, and then at the end he's machriya like the Rambam. And let's see how he quotes it at the beginning, and then we'll see how he's machriya. It's like this. Pirush Rashi, Zal, Mutter, Ato, Likach, Mehen, Neshech. Pirush, Le Pirushay, the Itzrich Kro, Le Mishrei Ribis the Goy. The Itzrich, Le Mishrei Avedosai, because there's no general rule that you can mazik a guy, and each time that you're hurting him, you need a separate heter. Kedisa perek agoizel. V'dochi leisashich. V'akshidin sashich leisagi the lav ochi kloima. The ilu mishrei lovois mimeno beribis. It's only a heter for you to borrow from the goy beribis. Lo yitzrich ko the amai taisik adaiton the litzre. How would you ever think that it's mutter? I mean, it's also. You need a separate heter to borrow from a goy. With ribis, without sinen lafuki ochicho deloy. So there we get the idea of Aseh. You can't do it to your fellow Jew. V'la avolov biaseh v'loisaseh. Kloima the lenochi sashich harei aseh. The shma miro lafuki achicho, and the aseh means that there's an isaseh by Israel. Lafuki achicho, the lav, v'lav abo mechlal aseh aseh. V'ho desani b'sifri lanochi sashich. How is it mitzaseh? And it means it puts both of them together that the isaseh is barachicha. V'hu lava bo machaseh shochadan mitzaseh ukiyetze bo shom called sipo tohira toichlu mitzaseh. And this is the Ramban quotes. And I think at the end of the show is Shishi. And here's a problem, because the Ram doesn't count. Teichlu mitzvah say. This, I'm sorry. This you have to see. This could be, this is the Aseh with Kufnun Beis, Kufnun Dal, Kuf Mem Ches Tes Nun Aleph, the mitzvah of B'dika Simonim, whatever it is, the Shrana and the Sifris, and it says that it's a mitzvah say. They learn that's impossible, and that's a Rayadach that it's an Isaseh. Okay, we say that. And that's Ramban in general by that also at the end of Shiur Shishi. V'zeh look at the Rambam shekosav shemitzasei min ateiru lahalvos as anochi beribus. That is the end of the Rishonim. Now the Ran continues, and this is the important part. V'nir li, v'nir loima, or nir li, k'divrei Rambam zal, the kaven, the maskona, the shmaited, the ribis, the goy, mit der reise shore, hadrinon, lemai, the salko daitoch, hocha. My love, sashoich, and v'im isa, the kro, it means that the posik, v'im isa, the kro, lahati ribis, itzrich, kenepish Rashi, zal, matche abraisa, the sifri legamre. If it's only a heter, the sifri is against it. The monole lava bo mechla say also dilma le mishtra yitzrich el al kochoch kisvile the ribis the goy shore. Once the Gemara is concluded, there's a heter. So memela. So if we don't have a separate conclusion as a heter, we can interpret this if we means an isaseh. Because the Rans are ready to accept such an approach. I don't know if the Ram would be ready to accept such an approach. But once the Sifri says that Ribis the Goy is Shore, once the Gemara clearly concludes that Ribis the Goy is Shore, so then we can interpret Lanochi Sashich Kipashte to the mitzvah. Kenesanya Besifri, Hariz a mitzvah say. The Kiva, the Askon of the Sugya, the Ribis the Goy, with the Reise Shore, Martina Kos, the price of the Sifri Kipashte, there's a mitzvah say. It means he says there's nothing of the Gemara that to support it per se, but once the maskon of the Gemara is that there's a heter, so what's the Isa say exactly? Doesn't make any sense. So it must be there's a mitzvah say. That's the way he does it. There's, I think, a Maganis Tova and what Simchas Leiv, and the Achronim talk about this a lot, Barichos. But whatever it is, the Ram clearly is working with the Sifri, doesn't quote the Gemara at all, just at the end, when it's a mitzvah zo, gam kein tnoim de Rabbanon, and has a mitzvah. Now, the Gemara in Bab Metzia, the Ram quotes in Perik Halocha Beis in Hilchos Malvolova. Also Chachamim, Shiur Yisrael Malve Es Hagoy Beribis Ktsutza. There's an Isa. Ela B'chtei Chayev Gozu Shemayu Mimaisov B'roi Yeshivoso Imoy. And I guess Yesh Koy Chacham Lako Dominatera B'Miksasai. Here it's only Miksasai. B'Shevi Al Ta'aseh. Sha'ayihu B'Reich Melfono V'Eino Rogil Etzloi. U'Lefich Muta Luvois Min Hagoy Beribis. Sha'ayihu B'Reich Melfono V'Eino Rogil Etzloi. So there the Gzei would have been shaykh by a Jew, even though it's not an issue of mitzvah, not a mitzvah. But this is what the Rama means. Well, the mitzvah zu gam kein tnoim d'Rabbanon, that it can't be Yosef Chayav, or Talmud Chochem is different, and that's what he's referring to the Gemara Mitzvah that mentions these tnoim. Because the tnoim, even though the Rabbanon tell you l'maisa how you can make kind of mitzvah bisman hazeh. Next, can't say I'm excited with this, and I think the thing that needs the most work is what does the Rama mean by nazikeu? And I think you have to take. I don't know what's for us. You have to take the Mob Metzia with the Chedush Yaran and the Rambam and the Leiv Sameach and the other Achronim and just try to read the Gemara. But I'm not sure how important it is for us because the Ram doesn't refer to the Gemara. The Ram refers to the Gemara only in an aside that in the conclusion of the Gemara first was not against it, and the Tnoim the Rabbanon on this Teraisa make a mitzvah. Next, mitzvah kuf sadites. This is a very rough mitzvah. Mitzvah Atesha V'Sishim Umeya. He shetzivonu lahashiv hamashkon leba'alav ha'Yisraeli. That's Ibn Tibbon. In Kapach Laharzir. Laharzir makes a little more sense. Lahashi means to give something which you're holding about kochot. Right, but Gzela. Here it's more so Laharzir. Hamashkoin leba'alav ha'Yisraeli. So mashkin, even if you have a halva by a goy or get toishav, there's no mitzvah to return the mashkin. The mitzvah is lahachzir hamashkin leba'alav v'Yisraeli, but it's not talking about after he paid up the loan. Be'es tzalkoi lov, when he needs it. Im hoya hamashkin mimashi yitztarach elov bayoim gon kli malachtoi uma'aseu is the things that he uses in his work or whatever he does. Yishivei lo bayoim v'yimsheket v'yimashkenu belaylo v'im hoy mimash yitztarach elov belaylo k'moy hakeses v'amichse sheyishkavo boy yishivei boy belaylo v'yimashkenu bayoim v'loshin bechilta. So before we go on, okay, we're coming here from a mechilta, okay? Ad boy Hashemes tishivenu loy, which is a pasuk in Mishpatim. Zok sus yoim shatomar zeloi kol hayoim. Sus lailo. So all we know, there's a pasuk in Mishpatim. We know from that pasuk ad boy Hashemesh tishivenu loy. It means that you return eksus yoim for the whole day. Kol hayoim. And then ksus lailo shatamazele kol halayla minayin talmud loimo hoshev toshiv loy, which is a whole new pasuk. This is in Vom Chavdalid. Loisov Beis Lavaravaitai. Excuse me. In Chavdalid Yigimel. Hoshev Toshiv Loi Es Ha'avoid. In Hoshev Toshiv Loi Es Ha'avoid, Es Ha'avoid. Kvo Hashemesh. So Mikan Omru Memashkin in Ksus Yoim Balaylo, Uksus Laila Bayoim. You can only make it a mashkin in the time when he doesn't have necessity for it. So it comes out, and you notice the Ram doesn't really quote a pasuk for this. Ukfai's boye momakis, he says, Aseh, V'shasehu Aseh Toshiv Lo Ese Ovoid. Right? So but he's concluding from the Gemara in Makis. But to say what happened over here is an amazing thing. There's an Aseh which is a conglomerate of two different psukim. There's one pasuk in Mishpatim about a ksus yoim, that they have to have it during the day, and a pasuk in Dvarim that a ksus laila, he has to have balayla. So we put the two things together, and we say there's a mitzvah hashava of the ksus. And let's read it again, as he says it. He shetzivonu lahashiv lahachzi amashken leba'alav v'Yisraeli be'es sokoelov colon im oy mashken shezor b'yom negivyot. If it's balayla, it's balayla. And you have, and he quotes the Mechilta that there's a conglomerate of two psukim for this. It's an amazing thing. Okay. Now here we're just going to get started. There's an amazing list of difficult problems, and this is what most of the last week and this week I was banging my head about. And I'm not sure I know any of the answers, all the answers, but I think I know a lot of questions, and I may know a lot of answers. We'll see. He says, Ukval is Bayer Bigmor Makis, that's Tezayin of an Aleph, She'omroi Le'sobel Abeisai Labar Aboitoi, there's an Ashola. Who Lav Hanitik Lasei. Usha'asei Hu Omroi Hoshev Toshiv Lo Aseh Ovoid. And that's the Gemara Makis and Tezayim and Aleph. Mashkein the Rachmona Omo Le'sovo El Beisei Lavor Avoitoi Hoshev Toshiv Loi He Ovoid Kvo Hashemesh. Now, the Ram presents Ki'ilu, there's an Aseh, there's a lav of Lisolo Terbeisai, and there's an Aseh that it's Menatik lav. And thus, that's what he says, that's the Gemara says, because he quotes that from the Gemara Makis. By his book Gemara Makis, that it's a lav and it's a laseh. That's what he says. Okay. There is also another expression of this aseh together with a different lav. Just to get the psukim down, because it says like this. There's an Hoshev Toshiv Loi Aseh Avoid Kvo Hashemesh, and there's Hasola the Ish Onihu Loi Sishka Bavoitoi. So here we don't exactly understand what the relationship between lav and aseh. Either it's like Shabbos, that there's an aseh and a lav like Tishbois and Lo Yisaseh Kol Melacha, or you can look at it in a different way, that there's an aseh of returning it immediately before the beginning of the time that he needs it, and a lav of not returning it all during the time they needs it. Then it's an aseh called malalav. And the emes is, that's the way the Maharam in Makis, Tezayin and Aleph, Teis Divrei Mascho, V'ho Ika, at the end, he suggests that that's the pshat. But I'm not 100% clear. You could support that passage from the Rambam, because the Rambam Perek Gimel, Halacha Hey, Im Ish Onihu Umishkanoi Dovo Shuhu Tzorach Loi Harizeh Mitzvah Laharzeh Loi Avot Be'eshu Tzorach Loi, at the time that he needs it. Maz Lo Esa Hakar Balaylo, at night, Kedei Lishon Olov, V'es HaMachrisha Bayoim, for the whole day, for the whole night, Kedei La'asais Bo Melocha Shnei Moshe Toshiv Les Avoi. Oval V'loi Heishiv Loi Klei Hayom Bayoim. So it means he passed the day. It's the end of the day. So it means the aseh precedes the lo isaseh. Shenem leisishka bavoitoi etzlecho zu ksus laila. You shouldn't go to sleep. So it's afterwards. It's night. So then if that's correct, you have something new, which I don't know if it's our issue to talk about now. You have an Aseh which expresses itself in two different areas. It's menatek alois Aseh of coming to the house and taking the avot, and it's an Aseh koid malav, when Aseh together with alois Aseh, in terms of returning the mashkin at the proper time. There's no need for the Ram to talk about the second aspect. And I'll tell you why. Because he talks about the first aspect, because he has the Gemara that's a lav nitel aseh. So he's proving there's mitzvah aseh. The fact that there's another expression of the aseh in other areas really is irrelevant to us. The purpose of Minyan HaMitzvos is not the Dinei HaMitzvah. He's trying to prove what the mitzvah, that there is a mitzvah. So the only way to prove it is calling them on makis. So that's fair game. Okay. Here, let me, for the next number of minutes, let me discuss problems. So I think that you try to be oriented for next week. Number one, I opened up the Gemara Makis. Let's start this way. What's the raya? The raya is the fact that Chazal called it lav nitel aseh, l'chayra. Okay? So I opened the Gemara Makis and Tezayin. I did not find any Gemara saying that Hoshev Ovoy is a lav nitel aseh. I didn't even find with the Gemara before, and the Ram before says Hashavas Gzela is a lav nitel aseh to the lav of Lo Sigzo. Doesn't say it at all. The Gemara just says they don't get malchus, and that means that it's a lav nitel aseh. I don't know. Look at the Gemara and decide if that's the case. Look at the beginning of Shiur Shishi, or the whole Shiur Shishi, that the three cases of lav nitel aseh, and decide exactly how this fits in. Is it true, next, is it true that lav nitel aseh, logically, that the aseh only exists after you violate the lav? It's probably true in Gezela. It's probably true in Shluch HaKan, at least the way the Ram learns. The question is it true? Is it true? Is it true in Hashavas Avoid? Because the person who doesn't, let's say, Lu Yitzur Bezdin, you don't take the Avoid Bizroya. Look at the Ram Per Gimel of Hilchais Ma'avoleva, Halacha Gimel, Dalid, so on. The only time you violate the lav, if you take the mashkin b'chosko, or the shliach bezin comes into the house instead of waiting outside. But the aseh of returning the mashkin, l'chera, is completely independent of lav. And if it's completely independent of lav, then what happens to lava nitek? Why do you call lava nitek aseh? And what does all this mean? So that's one issue we have to know. And if we actually don't know that it's really a lava nitel aseh, so what is the more? I'm quoting the more makis and saying it's a lava nitel aseh. Then the question is the Aseh is only by an oni, and the lav is by anyone. So are we going to say that if you take a mashkin from an oshir, you get malchus? The Ram says stam, then it's a lav and nitla Aseh, and also hilchos malvaleiva. Comes the Mishnah Melech and asks the kasha Rebbeinu Shalom. We know from Tmura that Tmura is not a lav and nitla Aseh. The Ram beginning of Tmura says it explicitly because the purview of the Aseh is greater than the lav. So it's not the pshat that it's only menatek as much as menatek. If the purview is greater, there's no nitla Aseh at all. And here the Ram seems to say the purview is greater and it's menatek everything. That's point. We have to deal with Mishnah Melech's kasha and see what the answer is. Another point, okay? There's another amazing thing going on over here. There are two other lavim over here. And the Mishnah Melech, the two other lavim over here, the Ram Perek Gimel, Halacha Aleph and Beis, there's a lav of Chabolas Beged Almona, and there's a lav of taking oichel. Okay? And the Rambam in Mishnah Torah says that you don't get malchus unless it's nisraf or nevad. So what does it mean if it's nisraf? And if it's nisraf never, you do get malchus. So is nisraf never to do anything? And the Rambam doesn't explain why. So we have to explore, maybe the pshat is the lav and the tilaseh is not only the lav of avoit achutza, but also applies the chabolas beged almona and also the oichel. It's an amazing thing. The Gemara Makkat doesn't mention it. But even more so, didn't we conclude that every time there's a lav and nitla Aseh, you have a separate Aseh for each lav? Like we had a separate Aseh, it said Tazev, and there's Peya and Peret and Oilois and Peya, Peret, and Oilois and Leket, and 4 different Asehs from the word Tazev. So maybe you should count this as 3 Asehs. We'll only find 1. So we don't know exactly where we're standing here at all. So is there such a cloud? Or isn't there such a cloud? And what does the Rama mean in Shiur Shishi? Is everything a lav and nitla Aseh or Aseh kod malalav like onus? So where does avoid the lav of avoid fit into the whole picture over here? These are some of the issues which I hope to explore next week, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we will try to deal with them. And these are the problems that we're grappling with this week. So, and we'll try to deal with it.